Hi, it's Mark Hartman with James River Armory. Today's video is to restore or not to restore. That is the question. We've been doing these, historical firearms restorations for almost 30 years. What you see, we can take one gun, you can increase the value substantially. We can take another gun and we can decrease the value. So basically look at historical arms in three categories. You've got collector grade, you've got shooter grade, and then finally you've got kind of wall hanger parts gun grade. Collector grades, and I've got an example here. This is a 1917 Enfield Eddystone. It was made in October of 1918. It's getting late in the war. The war would be over within a month. It probably maybe barely got issued from the condition. It was sent, you can look at the stock stamp, it was sent to the Raritan Arsenal. They probably inspected it. It went into storage. When you see guns in this condition, they are typical of what was released through the NRA or the DCM back in the 50s and the early 60s. The barrel shows virtually no wear to it. You've got 95+% finish on the metal. There's a lot of sharpness in all the cuts in the stock. I wouldn't touch this gun for a restoration because it's what the collectors want, basically an unscrewed with original condition firearm. An example of a gun to restore. Right here I've got a 1903 Mark I. This, I guess the customer picked it up from CMP years ago and it's been sitting in its closet. It's still heavily packed in grease. There's multiple finishes on it. You've got kind of the traces of parkerizing. You've got the beginnings of rust. There's no real pitting. I haven't really pulled this thing apart to see. I mean, it's interesting because it still has the Mark I cutoff, and it'll be real interesting to see how if it's got the trigger and the stock is inletted for the Mark I. Then it would be a very valuable. The stock here is definitely a candidate for rebuilding. It's got the later 1920s to 40s handguard. It doesn't have the high swoop hump that was typical of World War I issue. Barrel's dated 1919, so it is the original barrel to this rifle. It's gauging about a 1.5, so I would not even consider replacing this barrel. This gun will be very attractive, and we will probably enhance the value several $100s by restoring this gun. We go a generation back. We do Civil War era. Again, some of these can be incredibly valuable. I got two examples here. One, this is a model 1816. It's dated 1826. This is a prime candidate for restoration. Mild pitting all down. It's it's typical of a gun that spent the last 50 years sitting in somebody's attic. Some people call this patina. We call it the beginning of rust. You can see where there's light pitting here. The repolishing of that's probably going to pull, I would say, 80–90% of that out. From what I can tell, we really haven't punched it and worked at it. The board does not look bad. Stock's got dings and dents. It could use a refinishing. On something like that, it's got a nice cartouche here. We would save the cartouche. Basically, I'm showing this one here. This is one that we actually went over. This 1861 looked pretty much identical to how this 1816 appears. So this is where we take them. About restoration, there are various grades of collector guns. You've got something incredibly rare. You have a mint Irwin Pedersen carbine. Those guns are $5,000 to $6,000 if you could even find one. There's some very serious collectors that will pay very large amounts of money for incredibly rare guns. Typical U.S. military. They made these things by the millions. How many of them are still out there, we don't know. They used them in the U.S. service. Most of them ended up in foreign service, and then they would get transferred again to maybe like being in the third world. I've got some examples here. The U.S. was unique in that they basically planned on constantly rebuilding their rifles. They made them very easy to rebuild. Foreign stuff, Mausers, Enfields, that is not necessarily the case. The Germans did do some rebuilding. I swear the Brits, their goal was to use it, send it to the third world, and then scrap it. They're a tough gun to restore. Both these, I'll start with the carbine. We've seen thousands of these things over the years. The real question is what you want to do with it. This is actually an early inland. It's been reparkerized. The wood has been refinished. It's in the original configuration. It came to us in the original configuration. You know, a type 1 band, tended to be blued, a flip sight. Now, if your goal is to shoot this in a carbine match, you probably don't want to use this rifle. This is a little later inland. It has been through post-World War II modifications. They added the Type 3 band with the bayonet lug. They added an adjustable rear sight. They really made it. I mean, these things, you know, 50, 100 yards are pretty accurate. Both of these guns have the original stock that would have come with it. They've got the high wood. They're refinished originals. We take a lot of time. We use oil finish. It can take, you know, almost depending on the time of year, it can take 2 to 3 days to run a stock through finishing. The next probably most popular gun we've done is the M1 Garand. And I wanted to talk about parkerizing. During World War II, they went to the lighter color zinc phosphate. And this gun was done a little bit. Zinc was a lighter gray. It'll start to turn a little green and darken with time. The main reason they used zinc, the manganese was out, but the ability to get manganese, the bulk of the supply was located in South Asia, Southeast Asia, the Pacific Rim, areas that were subject to Japanese control. Manganese is an important alloy for steel, so really the secondary use to turn it into parkerizing, it was not approved by the War Board. So the U.S. essentially was using zinc phosphate parkerizing on the Garands, also on the carbines a lot, until about 1953. So you'll see, I've got this M14 here, an example of, this is manganese phosphate. So any Garand essentially refurbished after 1953 tends to have this finish. I mean, the funny thing about zinc is it darkens with age. Manganese will actually lighten. I usually recommend manganese. It's like a larger crystalline structure. If there's light pitting on the receiver, things aren't quite perfect with it. The zinc will enhance the minor imperfections. The darker manganese will actually hide it. So if somebody has a gun that's got light pitting on it, these things had a lot of use, and tens of thousands of these have come back into the country. You know, whether from Korea or Israel, I mean, you name it. You know, if they were an ally of the U.S., we equipped them with Garands through the 60s and the 70s. Parts are starting to get tough. What you've had for years, you know, in the 70s and 80s, the government demilled hundreds of thousands of these things up at Crane Depot, and they ran them through a chopper. A lot of small parts survived. They ended up in the hands of the surplus dealers like Sarco or DuPage. You know, they ended up with a lot of scrap, but a lot of parts were available. And then the second wave, when the stuff was coming in the 90s, a lot of countries, if we gave them 100,000 Garands, we would send them over a bunch of spare parts so that they could maintain their rifles. So we saw in the 90s a ton of Garands come in and a ton of parts. I mean, you could go, one of the things I like to do, and this gun was actually one of them, you know, receivers were cheap, barrels were cheap, and you could sit there, a lot of time, there used to be dealers at gun shows that would just have bins of parts, and if you needed an SA-12 bolt, They'd let you pick through it. Uh, the surplus dealers generally didn't like you asking for, a certain lot number and marking number on the part, because they had to put labor into finding it. But you could do it yourself. Those days are over. After the last batch of parts, really the 90s, they started prohibiting the U.S. origin guns from coming back in. There was about a two-year window where they could bring in parts kits, less the receiver. So probably 100,000 Garands were broken down. The receivers were scrapped, and that's where, if you look at like a Springfield Armory M1 Garand, Century Arms had receivers made. They put together GI parts kits on a new made receiver. After probably about 1998, they kind of stopped doing that. So the parts we're dealing with now, it's going on 25 years since there's been any new resupply. Wear parts, gas cylinders, op rods, we've watched them go from being a relatively inexpensive part to, paying $100 if you can even find one. So restoring these, and especially if you want to put this back, this gun was, I think, a late 1943. So if you wanted to put this back in the late 43, it would actually be cheaper to go on Gunbroker and find one that somebody else had done. Wanted to go over one other thing. The final finish we're going to go over, we're going to talk about German Mausers, because they have increased incredibly in value. And we get calls literally every week about restoring Mausers. These things, the German 98K, at some point I think they made close to 15 million of these things. Probably half that number is buried in fields throughout Europe and Russia. But throughout the 50s and into the 60s, it became the arm of choice for arming, revolutionaries or guerrilla units or counter-revolutionary units. So these things ended up all over the world. They were coming up with 98Ks in the Chinese hands in the Korean War. Viet Cong were using a lot of 98Ks. They were the ones the Russian captured. Most of the Middle East wars throughout the 1950s. The Russians would arm the Syrians with 98Ks. We would arm the Israelis with 98Ks. So these things tended to have a lot of use. A German Mauser, these things, when I was a kid, these were like $40 rifles. I had one guy I worked with, and one of the requirements, he went to gunsmithing school in the 70s, and one of the requirements was that they bring a German Mauser so they could turn them into deer guns. I mean, probably, tens of thousands of these things came back in the duffel bags of our troops. They're like a premier gun now, but I would easily bet that over half of those guns were turned into, 1950s deer rifles. I mean, a good caliber. It's got a Mauser action, just kind of your premier hunting rifle action. They had no value, and that's where you run into restoration. At some point, all these guns essentially had no value, and then I guess the best way to put it is Bubba would get involved. So you hope, a 98K. If it's been sporterized and they've left the sight base on, they haven't cut the barrel, they haven't drilled the receiver, it's a good candidate for restoration. What we've seen over the past few years, and they're starting to dry up, thanks to it was like the UN Arms Trade Treaty required countries to destroy their stockpiles of small arms. So, a lot of Europe, I've seen photos of literally mountains of 98Ks and G43s being set on fire in the I think it was Latvia or something. They just destroyed tens of thousands of these that would have made it to the collector's market. The smarter countries would disassemble them and sell the stocks to the importers. Small parts, stocks, something like that, and they destroyed the barrel and the receiver because they weren't importable. So stocks have been out there. They're starting to dry up. I'm starting to see Mauser stocks go from, you used to be able to, a couple of years back, you could find them for $75 or $100. Now they're selling for $300 or $400. So if you have a sporterized action, the German laminated beechwood stock takes a lot of abuse. I mean, they're, this is a refinished stock. It was kind of beat up, but they clean up pretty good. They're a lot stronger than a solid walnut stock, and the wood is a lot tougher. So the German stocks usually will clean up pretty good. Parts are readily available. So the biggest problem with a Mauser is changing the barrel. What you want to look for is a good candidate. Some of the Russian captures had great barrels. While American guns tended to use what's called half-acme thread, they were designed to be popped off and a new barrel screwed right back on. You can rebarrel one of these things in about 10 minutes. Mausers tended to use, I guess the closest thing is pipe thread. And if some of these things have been around and abused, trying to get that barrel off without destroying the threads is tough. I mean, a normal way of breaking down the rust would be heat. You can't apply heat to the receiver, you'll destroy the heat treating. So it's, our solution is we actually break it down and dump it in a bucket of CLP and let it sit for a week. At some point, even that, we still lose a few that we can't, that literally the threads just come apart inside the receiver. A ton of rifles came in from Russia. They're called Russian captures. I mean, there were thousands and thousands of them. What the Russians did, basically, they broke the guns 100% down. They dumped all the parts in black oxide and they reassembled them. If you look at something like a Mauser at various generations, 1936, 38 Mauser will look a little different than a 1942 Mauser will look a little different than a 45. The Russians just randomly put parts back on. You won't find any matching numbers. We're trying to rematch a lot of the numbers on our restorations we sell. We price Mausers based on exactly what you want us to do. We'll put the correct bands. I mean, the solid band is correct for 42 to early 44, and then you start getting into stamp bands. 41 and before, you're going to see the typical Mauser H band. We're making it authentic. If we get sight hoods for them, we get cleaning rods for them. We even have slings. If you want that, if you want the original appearance of how this firearm appeared in 1940. Finally, I look at these, my interest in firearms, especially these historical firearms, is one of history. Each one of these represents an individual soldier, Marine, that carried them. World War II, all the provenance of these has been lost. We don't know where they went. But I can imagine, a rifle like this, this serial number range, this could have been in the Battle of Saipan, it could have been on the Iwo Jima. I can imagine a young soldier in the Hurtgen forest hugging this thing as artillery shells are landing around them. This represents a generation that I just have the utmost respect for. What these guys went through, the casualties they took, the orders they followed, I mean, it's impressive. To me, we're almost like caretakers of these things. It's almost the only thing left from the American soldier of World War II, where there's a lot of politics involved with German stuff, but it's all that's left of that period, and it's something that guys like me, history buffs, we can collect and hold them. I mean, you look at some of the photographs, the newsreels from World War II, the vast armada of ships and the trucks and the tanks, all that stuff has long ago been scrapped. These things still survive. We're down to the last few years of the World War II generation being alive and around. I look at this as a kind of my way of honoring those guys. So if you have any questions about us restoring your firearm, feel free to email us at jamesriverarmory@gmail.com, and we'd love to take care of your firearm for you. Thank you.